Okay, now that you have some code, you need to know what's critical about it. Music on the show is from artist Quintas Moreira. Okay, now for a little personal update. I know I said I was going to take that away, but I think I'll just leave it in as these quick hits. So I want to say just share as much as you can. And what I mean by that is don't hold on to your assumptions, I guess. Assumptions, I don't want to make that stupid joke, but they're basically just what you think. I mean, they're not necessarily the real life. The more that you share those assumptions, the more that you correct them. For this week's quality code tip, don't just monitor, observe. Also have the observability come to you. So today we're talking about observability. And if you're not familiar with the term observability, it encompasses a lot of things, but basically it's supposed to represent that you can view the status of your application, ask it questions, and get the answers you need from it. This is very different than monitoring as a term, because monitoring only relies on basically metrics. So you don't want to rely on metrics necessarily, especially if you're not a real highly used application. Metrics aren't going to do a lot for you because there's not a lot of data there. But what you can do is aggregate a lot of things and ask it, and you can ask it all kinds of questions. So the first thing I think about this is unknown unknowns. So there are plenty of known knowns and known unknowns, but when it comes to unknown unknowns, there's nothing you can do ahead of time to deal with those. So as an example, if the application breaks in a certain way that you didn't anticipate, then there's really no way to see what's going on there because you didn't instrument it, or you didn't log, or you didn't add a metric for the thing that broke because you didn't think of it. That's the thing. You can't anticipate everything, so how do you know what to present to yourself from the application? Give yourself as much information as you can. If you give, say, a log, every single bit of information that you have at that point, then you can go back and parse that data to get the answers you need. This is probably not a solution for everything, and I'm still a bit new at this concept and practicing it in applications that I work on, but I understand the basics of it, and I think that everybody needs to shoot for more observability. So an example might be that something I've done recently, actually, this is an example that I've tried to externalize some performance information. So if you're running through an application and part of it is really, really slow and it doesn't really seem like it should be, but there's a lot of complexity involved, what I did was instrument it with aspect-oriented programming. So you capture before and after times of your running your method, and you spit out the difference, basically just performance numbers for when you're running through your code at different levels. So every single method gets its own log for performance, and so then you can go and track down how fast your methods, how fast your functions ran, so you can figure out which one was the slow one, and at least point you in the right direction. So that's one way to add observability, and it works decently well. There are plenty of other ways. You get a lot of information coming into your application. Anything that the user passes in the way of a user agent, a source URL, Query parameters, obviously a lot of that stuff is important to get your application to run correctly, but anything else that you can add that is given to you, you should keep track of and be able to search on it and aggregate it. And so then you know, or you can do whatever you want with it. So you can ask the questions later because you have that information. So say you don't really care about people coming from Safari versus Chrome. No problem. Later, they change enough to where there's a bug because someone's on Safari and not Chrome, but maybe you don't have the user agent. You should always have all that information because it's given to you. And I want to reference a person that I've been following on it. I think I've seen her talk at least twice. And that's Charity Majors. The first thing I know, I'm sure she worked on something before this, but the first thing I know that she worked on was Parse, which was a infrastructure as a service back, how long ago was it? I think it was like 10 years actually. I originally used it, I think it was about 2012 or 13. And it eventually got bought by Facebook and shut down because there's a podcast on it. If you listen to an episode with her on Software Engineering Daily, she talks about why it got shut down. But anyway, the point is that dealing with Parse, she learned a lot about observability because she didn't know why her application was acting the way it was. Some users were reporting things that she couldn't verify. She couldn't figure out the problem with. She couldn't solve because she didn't have the data. She didn't have the observability. So eventually they figured out what the solution was, and she talks about that in any podcast, any talk that she talks about. Well, she doesn't really talk about Parse very much, but if you can find one, then she really enlightens why this came to be, and this is now her business. Culture change is also a huge thing with observability, and I think that's probably what most people talk about with observability. I mean, the nuts and the bolts is not super important because you can do this with a lot of things, but including observability as part of your process is difficult. And I know that firsthand from just about every single thing I've worked on. Well, definitely everything I've worked on since I've become aware of observability as a concept. So it's difficult to deal with, to get done. I think if you want to take it on, I think it's a great thing to take on. There are definitely people that have made their careers out of it because they're the only ones who want to do it. Like I said, Charity, that's her business. This is a new area for me too, if you haven't heard of it before. I've only known about it for 2 or 3 years. And like I said, it's been a little difficult to implement it in products I've worked on. I wouldn't say that I'm really qualified to talk about it, but I think it needs to be on everybody's radar when you're creating software. Think about observability. Like I said last time, not really going into any reviewing of my week. I need to focus more, and I need to do a better job of utilizing my time in ways that are important to me. Kits are still around. I won't be updating them as quickly or as granularly as I've been doing. So just head over to kit.com/JeffreyFate and check out my coder, my cooking, and my kid kits. And the show notes are going to be at discode.dev moving forward. So check those out, and I will be back in a week.